It was Memorial Day weekend, 1971. Malcolm Cecil was on the third floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan, trying to fix someone else's broken keyboard in the summer heat. He heard a knock at the door. He leaned out the window. Standing on the street below was a young black man in a pistachio-green jumpsuit, holding a vinyl record under his arm. It was Stevie Wonder. He had come because of an album, a strange, alien-sounding record called Zero Time, made by two men and one machine. A machine so large, so complex, so unlike anything else in the world that it didn't have a proper name yet. They called it TONTO, and Stevie Wonder had heard it on the radio, and something in him, something that had no words, said, "I need to be in the same room as that." What happened over the next 3.5 years would change American music forever. Not loudly, not with a press release, quietly, in a studio, in the dark, with a blind man and a machine that nobody fully understood, and two engineers who weren't sure anyone ever could. TONTO stood for the Original New Timbral Orchestra. It had started in 1968 as a single Moog synthesizer, one of the first ever built. Malcolm Cecil and Robert Margouleff had taken it apart, expanded it, added to it, rewired it, year after year, until it became something no one had a name for. It filled an entire room. It had more patch cables than most studios had microphones. It could produce sounds that no orchestra, no piano, no guitar had ever made. Sounds that didn't exist in nature. The question was, who could hear what it was capable of? Stevie Wonder could. He walked in that weekend. Cecil and Margouleff weren't sure what to expect. By the end of that first night, they had recorded 17 songs. 17 in one weekend. Cecil later said he had to break into the tape storage room to find enough reels. He had no authority to do it. But Stevie said, "Don't worry about the tape. I just turned 21. Motown put money into my trust fund. We're going to make something here." He was right. Here's what most people don't understand about Stevie Wonder and TONTO. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about synthesizers. It was about what Stevie Wonder heard inside his own head, and whether any machine in the world was finally large enough to hold it. Stevie had been making music since he was 11 years old. He had played piano, harmonica, drums, bass. He had heard orchestras. He had heard gospel choirs. He had heard the full palette of American music from the inside, as a performer, not just a listener. And all of that time, there were sounds he could hear in his imagination that no instrument could produce. Colors, he sometimes called them, not literally, but the way a person describes a feeling they don't have a word for. There was a sound that felt like the color of 3 a.m., a sound that felt like the pressure behind your eyes when you're about to cry and you haven't yet. No horn section could make it. No string quartet. TONTO could. The way it worked was this. Cecil and Margouleff sat behind Stevie while he played, at the keyboard, in front of the machine. They were in perpetual motion, patching cables, routing signals, adjusting voltage in real time. Stevie would play a chord. Cecil and Margouleff would shape what came out, warmer, darker, thinner, wider, responding to what Stevie's hands were asking for. It was less like a recording session and more like a conversation in a language none of them had spoken before, but all three somehow already knew. The albums that came out of those sessions were Music of My Mind, 1972, Talking Book, 1972, Innervisions, 1973, Fulfillingness First Finale, 1974. 4 albums in 3 years, each one considered a masterpiece. Together, they are still called Stevie Wonder's classic period, the 4 years that separated him from every other musician of his generation and placed him in a category that had no name. TONTO was in every one of them. Here's the part of the story that almost didn't survive. Motown didn't want you to know about TONTO, not because of anything sinister, but because the image they had built around Stevie Wonder, the solitary genius, the blind boy who heard everything, was powerful, commercially powerful. 2 engineers and a room-sized machine complicated that image, and so the credit was minimized. The story was kept quiet. Cecil and Margouleff appeared in liner notes, but rarely in interviews. The machine that had made those sounds, the machine that Stevie had walked across Manhattan to find, was not part of the story Motown was telling. Eventually, Cecil and Margouleff asked for royalties on their work. The legal dispute that followed ended the collaboration. It was 1975. The classic period was over. Stevie went on. He made Songs in the Key of Life, considered by many the greatest album of his career and one of the greatest albums ever made, largely without TONTO, which tells you something. TONTO didn't make Stevie Wonder great. Stevie Wonder was already great. What TONTO did was give him a room large enough to put what was already inside him. And for 3.5 years, in a studio in Manhattan, 2 engineers and 1 blind musician built something that the music world is still trying to fully understand. The sounds are still in the records. If you listen to Higher Ground, really listen to what's underneath the bass, what's moving behind the vocal, you can hear it. A machine the size of a room. A man who heard math as music. And 3.5 years that changed everything. If this stayed with you, there's another story on the channel about the song Stevie wrote at 20 that Aretha Franklin turned into a #1 hit. Same era, same quiet genius, completely different story. It's waiting whenever you are.
Thank you for being here. These videos are dramatized tributes, built around real events, real people, and real music. The facts are real. The moments between the lines are offered in Stevie's honor. Subscribe if you'd like more. And if someone in your life would love this story, share it with them. Some music is too important to keep to yourself.